morning, ladies and gentlemen. Camels first came to Australia in 1840. They were brought out by a gentleman called Horrick, and Mr. Horrick imported a number from the Canary Islands. All of these died bar one, and the one that survived was stabled around Clare in South Australia. He was there for many years, and he was asked to take it on an expedition to see how it compared with horses. They were 5 weeks out of Clare when he showed him how good he was for killing the owner. He jostled him when he went to load a muzzle-loading gun, and he lost 2 fingers in the jaw. Lived for 4 weeks, and his final request was they shot his camel, so they both end up with a bullet. The next camels came into Tasmania from Karachi, a male and a female, also 1840. They found it was too cold there for them, so they sent them through to Melbourne. We hear that's just as cold. And in Melbourne in 1841, they give birth to the first camel ever born in Australia. Governor Gibbs from Sydney didn't like those Victorians having it over him, so he bought the 3 for the domain in Sydney for £75 each, and we hear the Victorians never ever forgive him for it. Next camels come out in 1860, 24 beasts for the Burke and Wills expedition, and the main people lost their lives around Cooper's Creek. One of the 3 Afghans also lost his life, that was Dost Muhammad. His camel tore his arm off at Menindee and he died of gangrene. He's not mentioned in the history books, and we generally don't tell you about it until after you have your camel rides. Next camels came out in very large quantities, brought out by Sir Thomas Elder of Elder Smiths in 1866. They put a stud farm in at Beltana, the government put another one at Mount Searle, and between the two of them they bred the best dromedary camels in the world, bar none. And at the heyday of the camel, there was an estimated 20,000 beasts owned by people in Australia and 12,000 in work at one time. This covered the whole of the arid area with them. All camels originated in North America and not in Asia, and their fossils date back to many millions of years in the American continent. First ones are only 18 inches high, so apparently the Yanks didn't feed them too well. They did do their full evolutionary cycle in America, crossed the Bering Land Bridge into Asia, and also spread down to South America. There's 8 branches of the cameloid family, and the main 2 are dromedary and Bactrian. The Bactrian has 2 humps and frequents the cold Mongolian-type deserts, and there's 2,500 in their wild state and 50,000 in captivity, so they're just about extinct. The dromedary like we have out here, there's an estimated 15 million in the world. That's not counting the ones in Australia, and they are on the increase. The female camel's gestation period is for 12 months, and if you took the young off and milked her like a cow, she gives you 4 litres of milk a day and can be kept in milk for anything up to 3 years. So it makes a very important animal to the eastern people. She doesn't carry water in a hump. When I was a young fellow, they said the bigger the hump, the more water they have, but it's a fallacy. They don't even store water. And in bad times, they use the moisture out of their ordinary body tissue, and they can be completely dehydrated, drink 30 gallons of water and be back to normal within 12 hours. If any other animal tried it, they'd dilute the blood and kill themselves. If he's out in country where there's parakeelia, buckbush, acacia and mulga, he can go 10 to 12 months and not even have a drink of water. Gets enough moisture, that type of food. But work him hard in dry areas. You must give him water every 5 to 10 days, otherwise he starts to recycle his own urine. This will eventually kill him, but it generally gets him from one bad spot to a better one. His hump consists of a fatty protein which they live off in bad times, and it's a food storage, not a water storage, and he can go many months with very little to eat. He ends up with no hump, and he's got a straight backbone, similar to a cow. It takes another 3 or 4 months to build him up again, and you always judge the condition of a camel by the size of his hump. His 2 front feet are very big and squelchy and act like 2 diaphragm pumps, and the faster you chase him or the faster he moves, the more he pumps his blood around. He doesn't perspire like other animals. If not been worked, he saves up his heat like a generator and only releases it after dark, and by doing that doesn't lose the moisture content with it, or very little. He's a cudded animal like a cow, or ruminant they call him, and because he chews his cud, you can't put a bit in his mouth. If you do, you're likely to choke him, and it is illegal to put a bit in a camel's mouth in Australia. We cut a hole in his nostril and put a little peg in about 2 inches long with a disc in the back of it. One line goes under his neck, you part into 2 reins, and just pull left or right like a horse. It's never necessary to have 2 pegs to steer him. Incidentally, in the Northern Territory, we're trying to peg our women the same way to control them, and I'm told if we get away with it up here, it'll probably spread to the rest of Australia. I'm told by most coach captains not to be chauvinistic about it, give them 10 feet of string, go from the kitchen, the bedroom, and out to the washing machine. So you're travelling with pretty good people when you travel with the coach captains in the Northern Territory. Bull camels come in season for 3 to 4 months of the year in winter time, and when they come in season, have no friends and no fear, and they're very dangerous animals. If he wants to kill you, he does it by crushing and not by biting. He'll swoop you in with his long neck, throw his front legs back along the body, and hit you with that big pedestal piece in the front of his chest. He weighs from 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. If he hits you, you're well and truly flattened. Female camels come in season for 3 one-week periods a year. They sound like women livers, and we reckon they cause all the trouble for the bulls. They're not the aggressive animal a bull is at any time, and I'm again told by coach captains that's where they differ from women. They know about it. But if a bull bites you, it's not the bite that does the harm, it's the reefing of the neck. He's a tree eater, not a grass eater, and he has this very powerful neck for pulling limbs out of trees. And once he grabs you, he just reefs that neck, and he'll take the muscle off your arm or your arm clean off your body, no worries to him at all. But out of season, he's quite a docile animal for the next 8 months. The old Afghans who came out with them, and regardless of where you come from in the world, if you're black and handle camels, you're known as an Afghan by the locals in Australia. 85% came from Peshawar in Pakistan and the steep country of India. And the very first Gan to come out was Dost Muhammad, put out by Landells in 1860. In the very big camel teams in Western Australia and the centre, they use 70 animals in a team, 4 men to 70 animals. They travel between 20 to 25 mile a day in desert country, and they carry between 16 to 20 tonne on the back of those animals. A large bull camel will be expected to stand up with 1,200 weight, and the smaller animals from 6 to 800 weight. The record for a camel standing up with a load in Australia and probably anywhere in the world was in Hercote Springs in 1910. One huge canned oil bull stood up with 1.5 tons on his back for a bet. Took 3 steps and collapsed, but he won the bet for the old Afghan. All he had to do was stand up. Also in the same year, they had a race between a horse and a camel over a 240-kilometre course in above-century temperatures. At the halfway mark, the horse beat the camel by half an hour and died an hour after he got there, and the camel rode back by 4 o'clock the next afternoon. It was never a fair race. The camel could have done the same thing for a month and had very little effects. He has one bad problem, that's his soft foot. And if you damage the sole of that foot, it can take up to 9 months to shed one sole and grow a new one. White people put them in wagons had to keep the hard ground, and this did happen quite often. Using a sandy environment with the proper packs on, he would have lasted a lot longer, and the old Afghan would walk an extra 200 miles just to keep his animal on softer terrain. They used special loading packs with big thick pads and loose stickwork on them. The stickwork would move with the load, and the pad would stay perfectly still on his back. You had a neck strap and a tail strap only, and you never girthed a heavily loaded camel. I was out to one station up here, and they got a big German piano they put up on one of those camels in the early days. They put the piano one side of him, a square ship's tank the other side, and they filled it with water till it weighed the same weight. And the animal brought it up 600 miles from the nearest railhead, and we reckon it was quite a feet. But you never loaded him back past the hip, and you never turned him in his own length. If you grabbed him by the noseline and spun him sharply, you'd probably have to shoot him. His legs can act like a lever, and they'll part the pelvis in the centre or pull the socket out. He was always turned in a long, slow circle and never back with 1,000 pound on. When you got him up in the morning, one got either side to balance him. Same when you sat him down at night. He never stopped for lunch, so apparently there's no unions in those days. But the main trouble was no girth. The oldest camel I own is the one I generally ride, Mirindi. He's 18-year-old and he lives to 48 years as an average. The oldest I've ever heard of in the world was in America. One lived to 60 years and it was owned by the cigarette company. But apparently they didn't let him smoke. All ours are caught within 20 to 200 mile of Alice. They'd estimated 16,000 running wild in their district. Boils and mange is their only problem, and we can ship them to most countries in the world. We do an artificial insemination test because the Israelis and Arabs show interest in the semen. They have millions of camels of their own, but 2,500 years domestication, and they've lost the ability to throw off the diseases like our feral animals. We keep about 70 on the property. We don't sell these. You've got a 6-year breeding cycle going with them. And if you want to buy camels off us, we catch them wild and break them into your requirements. In our district, we had a lot of camel men, and very few got any recognition for what they did. In 1926, we only had 28 white men and 8 white women in town, so you could be forgotten in the history books quite easily. One of these gentlemen was old Bill Little. He opened up Tempe Downs, Angus Downs, Kings Canyon area. He took the first sheep through to walk up Mineral Field. He walked from here to the Western Australian coast and back again twice with camels, and never even got a mention in the history books. His main trouble was he had 4 wives, and this could cancel you out quite easily. And he could be in a lot of trouble even today, I imagine. He stayed in his property until the early 40s, and when he left, all the native people left the area also and didn't return for 2.5 years, not till heavy rain washed his tracks away. And that's a sign of respect given to very few whites in the Northern Territory by any native. There were still spreeing whites up here in the 30s, and a lot of places you never walked out your homestead without you took a gun, otherwise you liked to wear a spear. He built a homestead for another camel man called McNamara in 1912 at Bosun's Hole. A very vicious little man. He came from the Kimberleys in Western Australia. He's in trouble over there around the turn of the century shooting natives. Apparently he didn't burn all the bodies and someone went crook about it. So he came to our district where no one worried about the finer points of killing them. The only way he got to his property at Bosun's Hole was with camels, and I got a lot of gear of his old camels to go on my new museum. In 1914 he chained up 12 Pitchinjara and he shot the lot because they took the bell off his milking cow. Wasn't worried about the cow they speared, he got pretty uptight about the bell. We asked the old natives who took the collars off them and burnt the bodies why Mrs. McNamara didn't stop it, and he said he got a new one of those each week with a set of hobble chains so he could manage a rugged individual. And if he come across a stray native, he shot him, lit a fire on him, and when he was burnt up, he moved on, and there was very few good stories about our Mr. McNamara and a lot of very bad ones. The old native didn't always miss out on the Northern Territory, but he was indiscriminately shot up here until quite late in the 1930s, and very few people from the eastern states realise it. If you read through the Hermannsburg archives, you can pick up some mention of it, and one report went into the government that if they didn't stop the killings in that area, there'd be no one left to convert to Christianity. And it was only for the efforts of the old Lutheran missionaries that there's many people left at all. But the old blackfellow did have his wins, and one place he had a good one was out on what they call the Tragedy Track. It's well named that. If you couldn't carry 26 days' supply of water on your camels, you couldn't get through at all. An old fellow took us 10 miles from his camp up to some rocks on the side of a hill. There was a skeleton of a camel, packed bags, and a lot of gear laying there. We asked him what happened to the prospector, and he just laughed and said we didn't like the bugger, so he probably chased him into the desert. I got a little donkey collar came from the same area, and where it was found, a lot of human bones as well as animal bones. It's one of these places they had the wrong type of animal and the wrong time of year going through. If you wanted to know the water was out there, you caught a native, you hooked him up with a chain, and you drug him along by the neck for 2 or 3 days without giving him a drink. And when he got thirsty enough, he'd show his secret water holes. We had one old time who used to do this quite often. I got him on tape. He said the last time he treated a man in such a manner was in 1934. He said he dragged him along for 3 days. The hole he took him to was a covered hole, a family one, and there was enough water for their 6 camels, their dogs, and themselves. He shot the native and didn't cover the hole back up again, which was his worst sin. And 6 months later, coming back through, there was a full family perished on the hole. There were 6 kids, 2 lubras, and a couple of bucks. And he reckoned by the smell of the country leading up to it, there could have been a dozen more, and it didn't worry the old fellow that he caused it. He used to bring the strings in from out there in the early days. And what I mean by strings is people up in neck chains. The neck chains were used to fish in the Northern Territory to 1935 and unofficially to 1940. The start of the Second World War stopped the practice. But if you wanted to bring that same warrior in, probably the only way you'd ever get him in is to put a chain on. Put a rope or a strap, he'd chew through and be gone. Didn't like being chained by the hands, and you had no four-wheel drives in the 20s and 40s, so if you wanted him, you chained him by the neck. I got a photograph of all the young people in chains, but if you weren't a man by the time you're 16 in that tribe, you weren't much good to the tribe in any case. They're very harsh people. The old fellow said he rasped the soles of a lot of natives' feet out around one mining area because they wouldn't stay to dig his wool from him. In drought years, he used to give them flour, sugar and tea for every bucket they brought in. He said he had runners, and the only way you treated a runner, you knocked him down, you rasped the soles of his feet, and when he healed up, he was soft-footed like a white man and always had a pen and white man for boots. And he reckoned he made good blackfellows out of a dozen the same way. And the last thing I'll say about him, he was on an expedition, and there was a native sneaking up in his camp. He said he yelled out to his mate to watch the bugger because he had his spears, and he said before I could stop him, the mate shot him dead, and we had to shift camp because he stunk too much. When we asked him what he would have done about it, he said I would have shot him in the guts. He'd have run 5 miles before he died. He said I wouldn't have to shift camp, would I? And you get a man with an attitude like that, he's a very hard man to buck. We did have 5 or 6 of the same calibre in town at the one time. One old gentleman drug a blackfellow to death with a piece of wire beyond his utility. Never got into trouble over it. Another one shot his daughter's boyfriend in 25 because he was black. Nothing done about it. Garland shot his wife's boyfriend for the same reason as El Tunga, I'm told. They held a kangaroo court on him and told him not to let it happen to get him in trouble the next time. Nugget Morton, who you can read about in your modern-day history books, got shot 5 blackfellows and left him to die during a Coniston massacre in 1928-29 because someone hit him with a tomahawk. And the ones he shot had nothing to do with it whatsoever, and he knew it. So you had some toughies in the territory. But the toughest of the lot in modern times would be Constable Murray. In 1928-29, he committed one of our last big massacres in the district and got away with a scot-free with a pat in the back. Directly and indirectly, he caused the killing of 69 men, women and children out in Cockatoo Creek because they speared old Brooks from Brooks's soak. I have 3 versions of why Brooks was speared and reckon he should have been speared about 6 times in any case. He took Walbury people out to kill Walbury people. 4 skin groups in that tribe, and one didn't care what happened to the rest. They had payback killings in that area, and they decimated their own numbers for many years after the same killings. He started off by shooting Bluey Jabberoo, who's 6-year-old. He's still alive in town. He got a bullet through the hip and out through the knee. His mother threw him over his shoulder and ran with one of his sisters, and all the rest of his family were shot and burnt in one heap. I've got Bluey on tape, and he said his old man was still kicking when they poured the kerosene on him. They had a government inquiry on it in 1928-29, which you can read about in our archives, and it states that plural amount of Aboriginals were shot, and it was justifiable. The constable admitted shooting 31. His mate Nugget and Maud admitted shooting 38. Bluey said there was another 14 family groups driven from waterhole to waterhole and every man, woman and child shot. Another 98 they didn't even bother counting, put down as natural causes, were driven out on what they call the 90-mile plain. They died of thirst. Too frightened to come back Murray's way and couldn't make it across it. It took 12 months for it to seep through to Adelaide, and when they heard about it, they got uptight, and they sent over the telegraphs there's going to be an inquiry. You had to come from Oonadatta to Alice on Camel in 28-29. He had plenty of time, and he went out and shot all survivors he could find. When the inquiry people did arrive, it was Murray who took them out. He didn't take and reburnt the bodies, and if he come across a stray native, he either run like blazes or wouldn't talk. Now the force in the early 40s with a police pension, and died about 5 years ago on Fullerton Road, Adelaide, well up in his 80s. Old Mort Conway, who lives in Alice Springs, went out in that country as a young man straight after Murray's second trip to get rid of the stragglers, and said he found 20 skeletons in one tea tree thicket. When he asked the natives how they got there, they said it was a corroboree group surrounded by Murray's men and every person shot. And he reckons 200 people died in our Coniston massacre in 28-29, and not the 31 our record reads. Another old gentleman who doesn't like his name being used said he personally counted 220, and our record still sits at 31. To even things up a little, I'll mention a massacre at Barrack Creek in the very early days. In 1874, the natives killed the postmaster, Mr. Stapleton, and the cook, and wounded another gentleman called Flint. And in retaliation, they shot out every native in the 30-square-mile radius of the place. You hear about the wonderful job our telegraph people did, you never hear about their killings. It's a good thing they didn't write in that particular one, for after killing all the grown-ups, they didn't know what to do with the babies and kids they collected, so they sat them in a line along Skull Creek and they shot the lot. It was probably the only humane thing that could be done with those Aboriginal children, for if they were left to dealt with by Aboriginal culture and they had no parents, they would have the legs and arms smashed with nullas and left to die naturally. In that country, probably been by ants. Thank you very much for coming to our camel farm. Alicia Tours does safaris. If you want to go out in the bush, we have camels, we'll travel. We do 1 week, 2 weeks and 3 week safaris, and if you'd like to go to our Northern Territory Tourist Bureau or Billy King's organisations anywhere in Melbourne or Sydney, you can book for these people. Thank you very much.